Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fahima Keshani. I'm a TREP member, Toronto Real Estate Board member, as well as a Vice President with PICRA, Professional Iranian Canadian Real Estate Association. I'm very honored to host today's webinar presented by Ms. Victoria Theriault, and she will be talking about using emotional intelligence in difficult times. Victoria is the founder and owner of Discover What Works and is certified in DISC, EQ, GIA, and team facilitation. Victoria coaches her clients to harness the power of effective communication to raise individuals and team performance prior to starting her own business. Victoria was a realtor on top team with Royal LePage and also manager of broker services at Royal LePage Canada. Victoria's background in real estate, sales, team environments, and management allows her to bring a unique perspective of practical experience combined with theoretical knowledge. Without further ado, I introduce to you Ms. Victoria Theriault.
Thanks so much, Fahima. I appreciate it. Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. And thanks for the introduction. The reason that I like to mention my history, not only with my certifications, is that obviously I am certified to talk about this, but I always, when I'm talking to realtors, like to let you know that I do have the experience in real estate. So I do understand the unique business that you're in. And it gives me a little bit more perspective when I'm talking to people because I have been in that situation. I have walked the walk. I know what a team environment is like. I know what it's like to be in sales. I also, when I was in high school and university, I worked part-time at the front desk of a real estate office. And I always laugh that that was my best education, even more than taking the real estate course. So that was it for me. That was good. So I do want you to know that. So this is usually very, very customized to the real estate sphere. So you might be wondering, with this topic, I think a lot of people hear these buzzwords like emotional intelligence, EQ. What does that really mean? So to give you a brief definition of it, and then we're going to move into how you can use it to make your interactions better, especially at this time. So what it really is it's understanding and managing the emotions in ourselves. And then it's also understanding and influencing emotions in others. And you'll see I've got self-awareness and I've got empathy on the slides there. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what each of that is. So I've mentioned there's a ton of things that go into EQ, emotional intelligence, but these are kind of the main ones. And this is sort of what we have time to stick with today. So self-awareness, this is a really big thing. How well do you know yourself? It's interesting. We often feel like we are a good judge of character. We can see it in other people, but how well do we really know ourselves? So are you more of a talker or a listener? Do you think you're an optimist or a realist? What's your personality style? So these are things that DISC profiles and EQ profiles measure, and that's what I'm certified in. So that is a great little scope at looking at, okay, what am I? What is my DISC style? What is my emotional intelligence style? They're really great for helping you understand who you are and what you can offer. That's the whole key of it, is what strengths do I have naturally that I can offer to my clients? So it's fantastic for self-awareness. Also, another element of EQ is empathy. And does anybody watching, I like to make this interactive as possible. So, and Fahima's going to help me with that. So can anybody maybe type into the chat box, what do they think is a good definition of empathy? It can be really short and sweet. Fahima, what do you think?
I don't have anything up here.
Do you want to take a guess at what empathy is?
I think it's what's very naturally. Because understanding where others come from.
Yes.
Kindness. These are the two response we got.
Okay. Yeah. So understanding where others are coming from. Absolutely. Whoever said that, that's great. That's exactly right. So empathy is really the ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. So it's the whole thing of What would I do if I were them? Not me, Victoria, but how would I relate to somebody if I was like Fahima? How would I put myself in her position? So it's funny with empathy. It comes very naturally to some people. And some people really struggle with it because they're not really able to figure out how to make a connection. So this is what we're talking about today. And I'm going to give you some tips and tricks to understand how people are operating to be able to make those connections a little bit easier. So when we're talking about this, we're talking about 4 unique styles, and I'm going to get into these in a little bit more detail in a minute. I'm going to ask you to maybe have a look at some body language, but just to start off by letting you know things like this. So people who are, high Ds, and I'll let you know what that is in a minute. So these are the people who they have their focuses on achieving goals. So when you're talking to them, they don't need a lot of chit chat and extra time. They want you to get to the bottom line. They're looking for that end result. So they would rather you be direct and concise, and they'd like point forms versus too many details. And, these are the people that when you're connecting with them, your clients, these are the people that want you to be brief. So texting them or a quick call, that would be ideal. So that's one approach to take. Now there's a whole other personality type where people who are high and I. So these are the people who want you to engage with them. They want to have a chat. They want to have a little warm up. They want you to ask how their weekend was. And these people are a lot more about feelings than they are about facts. So that's why they like to chat. They like to engage. That's very important to them. People who are high S's, they really like you to be supportive and calm. They like a steady pace. They don't want to be rushed. They don't want that sort of hard sales approach at all. That would not be good with this personality type. And then another personality type being high C, they're the people who they want information. So they don't need a chit chat like the yellow column where I have the high I's. They don't need you to be chatting and asking them for details. They're happy for you just to talk about the facts. So let's say they wanted to find out what the market's like. Just give them the market stats, show them the comparable houses in their neighborhood. That's the kind of thing that they want. And so you'll notice that I have customized at the bottom, and this is specifically for sort of right now, is best ways to connect with these people. So you'll see that they're not the same. A lot of the philosophy behind my business is that there is not a one size fits all approach to how you deal with your clients. I don't coach my clients that way. I coach them according to their profile. And so the point of this is trying to look at signals and signs and figure out what you think your clients' likely personality styles are. And that's what this is about. So I'm going to make this a little interactive again. So what I've done is I've got some little pictures for you, and I want you to tell me what you're observing in the body language. And then I want to know what approach you think you would take with each one, okay? So let us start with this one. So take a minute, and guys, there's no right or wrong answers. I just want to know what your first thought is. So anybody type in the chat box and tell me what you think of this person. So what kind of body language is this person putting off, and how do you think you would approach them?
I would say that he's being bossy.
He's too bossy?
Yes.
Yes. This one definitely gets a lot of that commentary.
We got acting bossy, and looks pushy and bossy, and dominant.
Dominant, yeah, exactly. Yep. So the person that was saying dominant, yeah, this is definitely the picture for that red column we just looked at, dominant. So this person is definitely that. So what kind of an approach do you think you would take with this person? Do you think you would try to chat with them and warm them up, or do you think you would get right to the point with this person? What are your thoughts?
I would get right to the point, but let's see what others says.
Yeah.
Nothing yet.
Okay, so I think it's I think that's very interesting that you say that, and that would be the direct approach would work the best with this type of person, and I will get into that in more detail. But
okay, we got a couple of comments, Victoria.
Okay.
It says, be short and clear with them, short temper, and angry, right to the point, aggressive. Those are the comments we got.
Okay, yep. And it's interesting. I always like to point out, some people say aggressive, and I see that in this picture. So when I talk about high Ds, remind me to talk about the difference between assertive and aggressive, but it's a different kind of a word. So assertive is one thing, and it's not negative. Being assertive is just, you know, to the point, knowing what they're doing. Aggressive isn't great. And often high Ds can come across aggressive if they don't have a lot of emotional intelligence. So good answers there. How about this figure? What do we think about this one? What kind of body language do you think she is showing, and what approach would you take with her?
She looks kind to me, but
Yeah.
I haven't got any response
So
yet.
definitely a different body language than the first one.
Inviting. We got inviting.
Yes, very good.
Difficult to negotiate. I think it's the last one, I'm guessing. Happy and inviting, self-confident. She's teaching us, welcoming, inviting. Those are the response we got.
Yeah, yeah. So the majority of you are saying that exactly. So this person is showing sort of self-confidence. Obviously, they're talking, they're engaged, the head is up. So yes, so this person is more inviting, and this is the person that you would want to engage with and have more of a chat with this person. And we'll again go into specifics about how you'll do that in a minute. What about this one? So try to ignore the medical, try to ignore the stethoscope and the jacket, because people always say smart. So don't look at that. Just look from the chin up and tell me what you think.
I think he's very patient and caring and trying to show us the reasons behind what he's saying by looking at the book.
Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, and so if you guys all look at the posture of the head, you'll see a very slight tilt, and that is meant to denote listening. So people of this personality style, high in steadiness, they're listeners. So it's funny, sometimes these are actually harder to engage with because they listen more than they talk. So these are the people you're going to want to kind of take a gentler approach with, try to probe a little bit, not too strong, because they are more of that supportive listening person.
Victoria, we got comments. Humble, easier to approach, negotiable, serious, good listener, professional.
Yes, very good.
Knows what he's talking. Oh, I think it's the previous one. Okay, that's it.
Okay, yeah. So so if you picked up on the good listener, very good. You picked up on that little ear tilt, so that's great. That's exactly right. Okay, and what about this figure? What do we think about this body language?
Willing to learn, I would say.
Okay.
Or let's see, details oriented.
Yes, absolutely. Definitely detail oriented, because as you're looking at it, you can see some with the other ones, the head was up and looking. You'll notice with this one, the head is down. So very, very focused on the task at hand. And that is what this personality type tends to do. It tends to be more absorbed in the processes than in people.
We got closed mind.
No. Okay, it's funny. This personality type is often misunderstood because of the fact that they don't have a lot of that eye contact or engaging, that they're often absorbed in it. So sometimes people think that they are unapproachable or aloof or any of those types of things. And that can happen for sure. But usually it's because they're just very focused on what they're doing. They're very, very into the details of their task.
We also got self-oriented.
Okay. All right, so those were some really good answers. I thank you very much for participating. That's great. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through what each of these are. And again, you guys were really good at picking up on some of these observable behaviors, and that is helping you with that EQ piece of having empathy, of being able to go, oh, here's where this person's coming from, and now I'm going to be able to relate to them. So that's what that's really good for. So breaking this down a little bit to go into it. So D stands for dominance. That's the one that's in red on the chart that I have. You know, Ds, as I mentioned, Ds are very much about what is the bottom line. They always are very goal-oriented. They are, a lot of the D adjectives describe them well. So they're driven, they are determined, they are direct. And a lot of times that can come across a little blunt. So that's not surprising that we had some answers that were saying things like aggressive or bossy, because they're so focused on the goals they want to achieve, the bottom line. Sometimes it comes across, like I said, a little bit aggressive versus assertive. In the figure, you'll see he's kind of pointing his finger. It's funny, D's sort of tend to do that. And I think it's more for emphasis than it is for, you know, you will do this. It's really not something like that. I always, you know, share this, and I like to joke about this, but I am married to somebody who is very high in D, and he can be in a happy mood and just telling a story, and even still out comes the finger. So we always laugh and tease him and have to do that back at him because he's not even aware he's doing it. So again, it's more about being passionate and emphasizing, and quite often that's where it comes from, okay? And so what are some ways that you can have a look at your prospects, your clients, and try to figure out, okay, what is this person? What kind of personality type does this person have? So you'll notice on the slide in purple, I have some little notes for you to help you figure this out. So if you're meeting somebody and you see they've got a very, very steady eye contact, so, you know, they're looking right at you directly, they're not, you know, they can lock eyes with comfort, they don't feel that they have to look around or shy away, right direct eye contact, that's a good sign. Firm handshake, again, we talked about that pointing. Often they will interrupt. And again, I don't think it comes from a place of rudeness. I really think it's because they have an idea, and it's probably that end result, that goal they're talking about, and it pops into their brain, and they have to just say, oh, yeah, and this happened too, or this is what I think. So quite often that's what it's about. They are direct and to the point, so probably their statements will be sort of shorter and briefer. And then what I like to do for fun, especially because, you know, maybe this is someone you have walking into an open house and like you really haven't spoken to them yet, so it's hard to know. So what I can tell you is that people who have high Ds, they often will wear very strong colors. So bold colors, they're not afraid of expressing themselves in these bright colors. So that's just a fun little thing I have for all four of them. You'll see where I tell you what they kind of are fashion-wise. And then I like to have a little bit of fun with it too. I always include some celebrity slides. So you'll see that I have, you know, I have Serena Williams, obviously driven champion, all about the end result, the goals, like so motivated and driven to achieve those goals. Of course, you'll notice she is not wearing like a traditional thing that tennis players wear. She's wearing a very, very bold purple tennis dress. So that's awesome. And then I've got Pink, the rock star. She's very, very direct. She will take the time on the red carpet to talk about things that she believes in, and doesn't like care to talk about the fashion that she's wearing, but is really talking about important things to her. And whether or not it's the time or the place, she doesn't care. She has something to say, she's going to say it. And I think enough said, where's Simon Cowell, right? Back to the American Idol days. I know he's kinder now since he's become a father, but that kind of direct to the point, concise, the way he would talk to people on that show. So here are the tips with D, okay? So summing all of this up that we've talked about. So what are you gonna do when you're talking to someone who you think is a high D? You're gonna get to the point directly. You're not gonna use unnecessary details or small talk. You're going to be punctual. This is a big one, everyone, to pay attention to. Ds really dislike having their time wasted. So don't be late. Make sure if you have an appointment, you're on time, because they will really get impatient and dismiss you if you're not. Always keep in mind with them the bottom line. So let's say you have to talk to them, and in your mind, there's a bunch of things that you have to tell them about. Try to make that as brief and concise as possible. So for instance, you know, so here's what needs to happen to get this property sold. So instead of telling them, oh, like this in the house and you should do this and you should do whatever, try to sum that up as much as possible. And the more you can tie in your point to the end result. So do you want your house sold? Yes, you do. Here's what you have to do to get your house sold. So action, result. Show them the action they have to take. That will get the result that they want. That is the best way to connect with D, okay? So I'm going to move on to the next one. Fahima, you can tell me if anyone has any questions at all about high D before I move on to the next one. And I will have a Q&A at the end. I'll leave some time for question and answer at the end. If you have things that we can definitely dive into it then, but I just wanted to make sure, does everyone have a good idea of this personality type after we've done this?
I haven't come across any questions.
Okay, so I'll move along to the next one. Okay. So this is, if you recall, this was the one that, you know, the hand up, the open expression. This is influence, the yellow one. So people who have a high I, as you noticed in the photo, and a lot of you said, they are open. They're very open. They are friendly. They love to talk. And, you know, the funny thing about people who are high Is, influencers, they often get credited with being really great at relationships. And they do love people. They love to talk. But here's a little tip. People who are high in influence tend to talk more than they listen. So be prepared for that. And they like to tell you all kinds of stuff. You know, I can tell you that being that chatty kind of person that they are, they quite often will tell you things that maybe you didn't bargain for. So you might ask them how their weekend was, and they will tell you everything. They will tell you about the visit to the vet from the dog, and the daughter's dance recital, and the son's soccer game, and you name it. But this is really important to them. So you will want to engage with them on things like that, because that's where you're going to make that connection. You know, they are very much communicative, positive, and they do talk with their hands. So with that picture, they're the people that, you know, you might see them driving in a car and they're doing this, and like maybe they're on the phone, you hope, but you know, they're definitely those hand talkers. They're huggers. I mean, unfortunately, I have to say, I feel sorry for the high Is right now during COVID, because they can't connect with people in person. They can't hug them. So it's definitely the hardest on them, I would have to imagine. And so, you know, that is very much what I is about, is doing that. And I can tell for you being in real estate, you know, you're probably very familiar with this, because in sales, the most common of these factors is the influence factor. So probably a great majority of you who are watching have high Is. Is make really great salespeople, just because they love people. They love to connect. That's very important to them. And Is can be, because they are so giving and open, they kind of wear their heart on their sleeve. So because of that, sometimes they can be a little bit emotional or sensitive if they feel that that hasn't come back to them. So sometimes they can be emotional, and they get very excited about things. So sometimes they make impulsive decisions. So you want to maybe remember that if it's a client and you think they're a high I, and you know, they go and they make this really fast decision that you weren't expecting them to make, something to keep in mind, because they also then could just as quickly change their mind. So the observable behaviors, how can you figure out if your clients, if your prospects are somebody who's a high I? So again, they're going to be very enthusiastic and sociable. They're going to be chatting to you. They're going to do a lot of that hand talking, hugging, you know, even maybe when they're talking to you, they might like lean in and touch you on the arm, that type of thing. They will tell a lot of stories. They will share feelings. Sometimes they're oversharers. And again, remember, they will often talk more than they'll listen. So you may have to really kind of center them in order to get them to listen. My fun fashion piece for this one is that people who are high in influence, they're usually quite stylish, and they will take fashion risks. So maybe they will pair together patterns that you wouldn't traditionally think go together, or they would have like, you know, a funky color in their hair, or maybe they've got, you know, like really for men, like maybe some fun socks or a pocket square or something like that. So if you've noticed that this person sort of has this fashion flair, chances are they could be high in I. And so I have some examples for you. Again, we have, you know, we have Obama, we have Oprah in terms of that very charismatic. Is are very charming, very charismatic, and they're easily able to persuade people to listen to them, which is why they make such great salespeople. So you will find that in there. And then I have Amy Schumer, the actress and comedian, and I don't know how many of you follow her, watch her. She's really funny and great, but she is a very, very good example of that oversharing high I. So, you know, she recently had a baby and she posts everything, like things that you maybe didn't want to see. She's got it all up there. So she's the example of that open sharing high I. So what are you going to do now about having that? So with a high I, remember that they like to talk and engage. So even if you have something to say to them, you want to have a business conversation with them, you have to remember that they need a little bit of warm up. So take the time to talk to them and engage them, because that is more important to them than anything that you're really saying. They want to have that connection with others. I have here, engage them in person whenever possible. Obviously not right now in our current circumstances. That's not really possible yet. But when we get back to hopefully a normal thing, they love to meet in person. Don't send them lengthy emails. They don't want to read lengthy emails. They won't read them because details aren't important to them. So doing a phone call would be much better. And so remember that they are quite emotional. So, you have to be aware of potential sensitivities. They do feel sometimes rejected if they don't get that same warmth or energy back. So a good way to talk to high I's is you kind of want to do that mirroring thing. So you invoke emotions into what you're saying because you know that is important to them, that they make emotional decisions. So for instance, I feel that this would be a good fit for you. I can see you making many happy memories in this house. So again, and you notice I even kind of went like that. I kind of clutched, my chest. Invoking emotions with them really works because that you're speaking their language then. This is you having a little bit of EQ into, oh, this is what this person wants to hear. So you're going to kind of meet them where you know that that's going to matter to them. That's what high I's really like to hear. Okay, so moving on to steadiness, high S. So remember, this was the person, and somebody picked up on this, which is great. One of you out there watching, about the head tilt. So yes, S's are really, really known to be really good listeners. And it sometimes is challenging as a realtor trying to get in there and make that connection, because when somebody, doesn't talk as much. So with I's, remember, I's are all talking and not as much listening. Well, we have the exact opposite here. We have more listening, not as much talking. So you definitely have to have a gentler approach when you're dealing with somebody who is high in steadiness, okay? So they're very deliberate. They're very persistent. So if you have a client or something and you're like, wow, this person is really tenacious. Like they want to finish what they started. They need to do all that stuff. That is definitely something that high S's have. They are very persistent and very thorough. What I can say the most about this for you is that high S's hate to be rushed. So no pressure tactics with a high S. So let's say they're thinking about something and you try to nudge them to say, okay, well, do you think they're going to look at you like a deer in the headlights? That is not the approach to take with a high S. You will scare them and you will lose them. So you have to be prepared to approach them in a very steady way. So it has to be something like, hey, so you know what? I did up your CMA presentation. This is what I think your house is worth based on the comparables. But you know what? I'll leave it with you. Take your time, flip through it. If you have any questions, let me know and I'll get back to you. So I don't know if you noticed, but I slowed my pace down when I was saying that. And I had a very hands off, you take your time, that kind of thing. Because having, rushing into something with them is going to make them freak out because they don't make quick decisions. Whereas the D, remember at the beginning, the D, the determined, you can actually go for the close really quickly with a high D. Why is that? Because they're decisive. They don't need a whole bunch of stuff. If you give them the key points, they're ready to make their decision. Boom. Okay. If you do that with this S, you'll lose them. And I have to give you this word of caution. One of the things that high S's are notorious for is they have this thing called the S nod. So let's say you're talking to them, you're presenting to them, and you're getting this. So they're nodding. They kind of have a neutral expression on their face. They're nodding. I want you to know that that nod does not mean yes. The nod means I'm thinking about it, I'm considering it, and I'll figure that out in my own good time. So do not confuse the S nod with yes, because it's not. That's a big, big tip for high S's. So again, in purple, you can see what are some of the things that you can try to figure out if you have a prospect or a client. Well, you think to yourself, does that person listen more than they talk? Are they doing that famous S nod? Are they doing that nod? do they reserve their opinions? So sometimes they're not saying, yeah, you know, I like it, or, oh my gosh, look at the hardwood there, or, oh, I couldn't live with that color in a countertop, or whatever. No, they don't do that. They're kind of themselves thinking it. So it's really, really hard to figure that out. So if you have someone like that, chances are they're a high S. You know, they have kind of intermittent eye contact. You remember with the D, I sort of leaned in and showed you that kind of direct eye contact. With an S, you know, there'll be moments of it, but then there'll also be moments of them looking around or maybe looking up to consider thoughts. They are easygoing and patient. So if you notice that, that's another thing. And then the fashion piece that I would tell you for S's is that they dress for practicality. That doesn't mean it can't be really nice clothing or stylish, but just whatever the day calls for, that is how they'll be dressed. So if it's going to be outside and it's raining and, you know, they have houses to see, they will think about that. They'll have rain boots, they'll have an umbrella, they'll be prepared. So that is the point. They'll dress for whatever is sort of needed for that day. Okay, so again, with S's being good listeners, S's quite often are medical professionals or teachers or people that like to give and support. So I have Ellen DeGeneres on there as my example, as the great listener, because if you ever see her interviewing people, she has the fastest, quickest comebacks, and she wouldn't be able to do that if she hadn't been hanging on every word that her guest was saying. I have Dr. Sanjay Gupta, who has honestly been, especially during this whole COVID time, very much sort of the voice of America, where it comes to being that doctor, being the steady source of information that you can trust and that you can depend on, having that, again, that nice, steady approach about him. And then I have Princess Kate, kind of to show that whole, S's have that whole sort of keep calm and carry on, and Kate really embodies that, especially with all the issues that the royal family had earlier in the year. You would really never know it looking at her. You can't tell. She's just sort of always got that, her S face going for her. So when you are dealing with your S client or prospect, again, just remember, you want to speak at a steady pace in a measured tone because you want to create that very relaxed vibe. You don't want to rush them. I think I said that enough times that you guys are going to remember that, right? But don't rush them. Give them the time to think it over. The irony of that is the more that you say to them, oh, take your time, think it over, chances are they will make a decision faster because you've almost given them the permission to take their time. So now they don't feel pressured that they have to come up with an answer. And again, ironically, they will end up giving you that answer faster than they would have if you had tried another approach. Be prepared to do most of the talking when you are dealing with high S's. Again, remember that S nod, don't be fooled by it. It's not yes, it's just I hear you, I'm processing it. And an example of, you know, a statement that you would make to a high S would be, okay, so take some time, think about what we discussed, and get back to me when you're ready. That's music to their ears. So moving on now to our fourth personality type, which is compliance, high C. So that was the figure, if you remember, that was very looking down and very absorbed in the task. And so, yes, that was meant to show that people who are high in C are very focused on stuff. They're focused on details. They're focused on processes and procedures. C's want to do things the right way. They don't want to make mistakes. They want to understand what they're doing is giving you the best possible result. So if you think, you know, you have a client that's a high C, I tell you what, make sure you do your homework because that high C will have done their homework. They love to research and look up information. And for a C can't make a decision that is emotional. You know, they might be feeling a certain emotion, but they don't almost let themselves because the logical part of their brain kicks in and they think, wait a minute, you know, is this a good idea? Quite often they'll have like a checklist to be like, oh, I need this, yes or no. So really it's about details for high C's. And for a high C, the more information that they have, the more confident they become. So they really, really need information to make a decision. So if you think that you have somebody that, you know, has a high C, you want to give them as much information as possible because that helps them make a decision quicker. They will not make a decision based on bold statements or you saying, yeah, don't worry, I've done this before. No, they need to see that proof. They need to see the stats, they need to see whatever information you can provide to them. So C's are very much, you know, logical. They can be perfectionistic because of the fact that they want to be right. They want to be doing the right thing. They don't want to make a mistake. Very, very important to them. They're definitely more rule followers. They want to have a system and be organized. And so they are more about processes than they are about people, because that gives them comfort and security. So again, looking at the column that I have in purple, what are some of these signs for you to pick up on? What are some of these observable behaviors that will allow you to empathize with a C? Well, they're going to be neat and orderly and punctual. So again, C's have some similarities to D's in that they're on time and they want you to be on time. The difference is the D would probably be very direct about telling you that they weren't happy that you weren't on time. The C probably won't say anything, but inside they'll be annoyed. They'll be fuming inside. So they're very neat and orderly. They'll always show up on time. They'll probably take notes. So this is maybe your client that is writing notes or has a tablet or is keeping some kind of column about, yes, this is what I want in a property, or no, this isn't what I want. They are always going to ask you for information in detail. And so when we talked about things with the other ones, like with eye contact, one of the big clues for you with a high C is that they don't tend to make a lot of eye contact. And usually it's because, you know, especially if they're in a situation where they're not certain, they're probably, you know, sussing it out, looking around, maybe they're looking down at their spreadsheet or their notes or whatever it is. So if you notice that the person isn't making a ton of eye contact with you, chances are that's what it is. Again, they're kind of reserved, more so even than an S, so they're not going to share their feelings that easily for you. So that's a little bit tricky too. You kind of really have to try to really look and figure it out. They do want detailed information. So when I was saying to you about don't send people who are high in I, don't send them detailed emails, here is your core group that wants detailed emails. So if you're sending out stuff with a lot of information, this is the group that wants it. They actually will prefer to get an email from you than a call, because they can go back, they can look at it, they can see that all the information is there, and that gives them comfort. And then, you know, the fashion piece for C's is that they dress very neatly and they will look very tidy throughout the day. So what's interesting about this is that when we talked about the high I's, the influencers, and I said that they are very fashionable and they take fashion risks. The funny thing, though, is that chances are at the end of the day, if you're bringing them around, you have, let's say, like 10 showings. By the end of the day with the high I's, they kind of look a little bit like a train wreck, because, you know, they've probably been hugging you or they've been coming in around and they're just very much who they are, and then they don't really worry about it. Whereas with the C, you'll find that the C will be the person to go into the bathroom, brush their hair, you know, straighten up. So a C at the end of the day will look exactly as neat and tidy as they looked at the beginning of the day. So that's another fun little tip for you to look out for. So my examples for high C, C's are also known to be very, obviously very intelligent. They love to learn as much information as possible. So I've got my examples there. I've got Bill Gates for obvious reasons. I don't know if you're familiar with Edward Norton, but he's a phenomenal actor, and he is definitely one of those people that he's a perfectionist. He is very much throws himself into his roles. And if you ever see him on the red carpet, which is very rare, he doesn't like the whole schmoozing part of it. And he's often, his eyes are downcast. He doesn't tend to make a lot of eye contact. And then I have the lady who played the Queen on The Crown. I don't know how many of you watched it on Netflix. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. It's really good. But that really demonstrates what high compliance is about. Is about when the Queen was there, she had to make decisions that were the best thing for the monarchy, for her country. And she might have wanted to do some things for her family, but she instead had to do what was best for the monarchy. So that's a really good example of compliance. So what are you going to do with somebody who you think is a high C? Well, you don't want to have prolonged direct eye contact. You know, sometimes people, if they're not getting eye contact, they kind of are like going around and chasing it and trying to make that eye contact. Don't do that. You don't want to intimidate them. Always be prepared for your meetings. Do your homework. Make sure that you're using logical statements, and make sure that you have facts and details to support your point of view. again, they're not going to be taken in by, you know, grand statements or by you just having, you know, a great chat with them the way I would. They need to see the information. Always provide the information in writing. Again, they want the details. And so here's an example of how you would be talking to your person who's high in C. So you would say something like, based on these monthly stats, the facts seem to suggest. So you see what you're doing? You're saying to them, not like, this is what I'm telling you. You're actually taking it and pointing to the information, and you're saying, this is what the facts are suggesting. And then that way they feel like, oh, you're not going to try to tell me or sell me something. You're just showing me information. Now I'm making that decision by looking at that information, and that is how I will make it. And then that is a great approach with them, because they'll feel like you're just there to provide them with the knowledge, and that knowledge is going to help them make a decision that they can live with and that they can be proud of. So what I've been telling people right now, you know, during this period of time, because obviously a lot of stuff has slowed down and what have you. So this is, you know, I would say take this as an opportunity to go through your database, your CRM, and consider the observable behaviors that you've seen. So whether it's new clients that you're adding, but I say go through the existing one, especially now. Now is a really good time to do that. Go through it and think to yourself and say, okay, so let me think of Al. Okay, so what does Al do? That, you know, does he tend to be very to the point, or does he tend to like a long story? Does he talk with his hands? Does he, you know? So it's a matter of you thinking it, and then what you do is you just pop that right into your CRM, and then the nice thing about it is then you can remember, oh, okay, so I think this person is a high D. Therefore, I'm not going to waste a lot of time. I'm going to get right to the point. And I'm going to send them a brief email or a brief text. And I can go back and bring that slide up again if you want to see that, just in terms of getting to the point. But here's a little question for all of you to see what your thoughts are on this. Okay, so here's an example of something that you might do when you're trying to put this into your CRM. So Katie is always super chatty, and she gets off topic really easily. When I send her emails, she rarely reads all of the information. And instead, she'll call me and ask me something that I've already answered. I think Katie is, what do we think? What do we think, Kate? What of those 4 factors do we think are going to be the highest factor for Katie? So again, she's very chatty. She gets off topic easily. She doesn't respond to emails. Instead, she'll phone me and maybe ask things that I already said. So what do we think the factor for Katie would be?
2 people responded high I, and 1 person said high D.
Yes. Okay. Anybody else want to take a guess before I say it?
High I. Again, we got I. We got so many I's.
Yes. Very good. Yes. All right. Very good to all the high I's. Katie is a high I because she has, you know, you can see it. There she is being super chatty. She's getting off topic. She's not reading the detailed emails. Again, because she hasn't read the details, she's asking you something that you've already answered. So I noticed a couple people had said D, and I know the reason that was probably said. So all of these sort of have interconnected relationships. The part that you were probably picking up on is not reading all of the information. So Ds also don't want a ton of information. They want sort of 2 or 3 bullet points, then they'll make their decision. But they're not necessarily super chatty, and they don't get off topic. They're very, very direct and decisive and determined and all of those things. So in essence, the whole point of this is, you know, now that you have sort of been given, you know, I know none of us love this, but if we look at it as an opportunity, we've been given some extra time to maybe do some of this work that we weren't able to do. So take the time to go through your database, write in what you think, and then plan out how you're going to customize your approach. And you know what? You're going to see that your interactions are going to improve. So if you were to take a one-size-fits-all approach, you know, maybe you'd get 50% of people. Maybe your approach would be someone who would get D's and C's, let's say. And then what? Then you're missing out on all the I's and the S's, or vice versa. So my point is, don't miss out on that other 50%. Figure out the personality types. And once you know it, take what you're going to do, speak to them in their language, give them the information the way they want to, and you are going to find that you are going to strengthen those relationships, and you're going to be able to deepen those connections much further than you have before. So if you guys, have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
There are a lot of questions, Victoria.
Okay.
Okay, so I start with the first one. So if you're hiring team member, is it better to look for high I?
That's a good question. It depends on what the role is on the team. Are you talking about another salesperson?
Yes, this person that is asking, I know him personally. He's a broker of record of a real estate brokerage. So I think he's talking about like recruiting agents, what he should be looking for.
Right. So what I can tell you is that there's no profile that you can't do sales. You can absolutely do sales if you don't have a high I. However, it doesn't come as naturally. So the quintessential prototypical profile for a sales agent is a high I followed by a marginally high D. That tends to work really, really well for sales. So ideally for sales, you would see some kind of combination of that. Now, having said that, I have some clients that I have that are S's and C's and that are doing really, really well. The difference is my approach when I'm coaching people, as I mentioned to you, is really making it about their profile. So people who are I's and D's, that prototypical sales profile, they are really good at networking, at going to events with big people. They're good at cold leads. They can, they're the people who can cold call, door knock, do things like that. Your S's and your C's, if you say to them, door knock, cold call, it's not going to happen. S's and C's need warm leads. So what I mean by that is maybe they're at an open house. So somebody's already coming to them. They're already in that zone of wanting to look for a house. And then that S or that C is in a position of experience or authority, and then they can speak to that. That works for them much better. They're much better at working their sphere of influence, building on things like that. So when I coach people, I would never say, oh, you can't be in sales because you're not a high I. I would never say that, because there's different ways of doing it. And the whole point is know what the strengths of your profile are and then leverage them. Leverage those profiles. And what you're going to find is quite often people of high S's and high C's tend to attract clients that way, because if you're a high C and you're giving, a CMA and it's super detailed and you've got all the stats, chances are the people who are going to respond well to that are also high C's, because they'll love it. And so it works, everyone finds their niche. But I do recommend for sure profiling. If you're having someone joining a team, that's a lot of what I do. I work with a lot of teams. And when we build out the team, when they're hiring new people, I'm able to help them, because I can say to them, so for instance, oh, you have like 4 high D's on your team and you have 3 high I's and none of you have a high C. So that's kind of not ideal, because you need someone on the team to have detail, to be a detail-oriented person. And so when I talked about the typical sales profile, there's also a very typical, administrative technical support profile. And so those people tend to have more of an SC profile. So you would definitely always want to have at least someone like that on your team to make sure that all those details and all those important things are not getting messed up.
Okay, the next question is, what's the best way? This question was asked a while ago. You probably answered this, but what's the best way to find out about a personality style of someone when meeting with them?
Right. So looking at those observable behaviors that we talked about. So again, having a look at how they're dressed, having a look at how they interact with you. Are they super chatty? Are they talking with their hands? Are they making short, direct, concise statements like a D would? Are they more like hanging back, nodding, listening like a high S would? Are they making notes? Are they asking every question that they ask is about facts or details or logic? All of those little things are going to give you the clues as to who you think these people are. Give you a good enough guess to know how to relate to them.
The next one is there a book that you would suggest about this interesting topic? For someone to
a lot of it is obviously fascinating. A lot of the books on this are very kind of technical. This was created in 1928, DISC, and a lot of it is sort of back in terms of that stuff. So it's not as user friendly. So usually what I would say, and I mean, this is being recorded, right? And so everybody, I assume, is going to get a copy of it. So one of the best things is really to kind of study those slides that I sent you and to really have a look at it. And then the chart that I showed you at the very beginning of the presentation, I don't know if I can pull that back up again. Let's see. Okay, so let me just pull this one up. No, I must have gone past it. Oh, there we go. So yeah, I would definitely recommend looking at these slides that are being shared and read those parts over. And then this is like a really good little cheat sheet. I have sort of came up with this during this period of time because you'll notice that I have certain things in here that speak to kind of what's happening right now. And I've shared this with a bunch of my clients. So it's like all of the information and it's condensed. So it's reminding you of what that personality type wants to hear, what they need to hear, and what you should do. You'll notice on the very bottom, I've given you reminders. So for instance, with a high D, text them or call them, but be brief. For high Is, this is a part I had to add in because of COVID. I would video call your high I. So I would do a FaceTime with them, or if there's a bunch of them, do a Zoom. They really are craving seeing interaction, doing that. So at the very least, phone them, if not video chat. S's really like personal notes. So either mail them or drop them off to people who you think are that, the more the listening, the kinder, those kind of people who have that gentle approach, they really, really love personal notes. And then with your high C's, you're definitely going to want to send them emails or texts. Again, just to the point. They don't need that whole warm up, how's it going, whatever. You can get right to the point with them. So I would really just suggest that you look over this kind of thing because it's really quite helpful in terms of the practicalities of it.
The next question is it important to know what personality we are, then learn to deal with other types?
I'm sorry, you cut out a little bit. So is it saying, is it important to know what personality type you are yourself?
Yes, for dealing with others.
Absolutely. So let me just pull up this slide. Remember the slide where I talked about these two parts of emotional intelligence? So of course, understanding and managing ourselves, and then we can understand and influence others. So what I had here is the self-awareness. So this is absolutely right. So the more you know about yourself and what you bring to the table, the better you're going to be at understanding the other person. So that's what I do. I do DISC profiling and I do EQ profiling. So the DISC profiling is definitely more of the simpler, those 4 personality types that I showed you. You do it's an online, I send you a link. It takes 10 minutes to do it. And then I'm able to provide you with a whole bunch of reports that talk about things like, what are your strengths? And it'll say things like that. And I have specific ones for people who are in sales. So they're sales audits. So I talk about, what is your strength in sales? Are you a natural opener? Are you a natural closer? Are you a customer servicer? And the whole point of this is to know where your strengths are. And then you can hone in on those areas and make sure that that is what you make your business, that you are working to your strengths. That is always what I tell people. Leverage the strengths of your DISC profile and you will be amazed at the results.
What personality do you think a team leader should have? High D, I, S, C.
Yeah, that's a good one. So my personal experience, I have coached about, in terms of teams, probably about 15 to 20 different teams. And more often than not, the team leader does have a high D. However, I do have a pretty good high ranking team that he doesn't. He's got a high S. Here's the interesting thing about teams is that the team leader tends not to be the manager, if you know what I mean, if you know how that dynamic works. And if your team is big enough, what I ideally see is that people almost have another person being the actual manager. So the D is the person who's out there getting the business, getting the leads, doing the sales, and not necessarily being the one to lead or inspire the team or listen to that team's struggles. And so a few of the teams that I work with actually have somebody who's sort of like the team manager. And I can tell you that that personality style is more of an SI. So that listener, the one who can listen, who can encourage, who can be the mentor. So quite often I will see that. And often I see in managers, brokers, managers, quite often they have an S as well because they're good listeners and they're supportive and they do like to help people.
What personality is suitable for a salesperson?
Yeah, again, I never say that there's just one, but what I can tell you statistically is that high eyes are the largest group. So if you study, so I can tell you about my own personal database. I have, a huge amount of high eyes. And then the company that I'm certified with did a formal study of sales in North America. So they looked at 20,000 people. And what the results were out of 20,000 salespeople, the one that was most common to have was a high eye.
Someone is asking, please show the last slide again for a high C.
Okay. Was it this one or was it the actual breakdown of a high C? The actual one where I have all the other.
The question was about 15 minutes ago, so I'm guessing you probably answered already.
So it's probably this one, maybe?
Probably, yes.
Okay, so I can leave that one up.
The next question is, do we have mixed personality, like half high C and half D?
Yes. Great question. Great question. Absolutely. So when you do a DISC profile, you will see what they are. So what I can tell you is about 50% of the population has 2 high factors and 2 low factors. 25% of us just have 1 high factor. So if you're ever trying to speed read someone with 1 high factor, it's so easy. It's very, very obvious. And then the other 1 in 4 people, they have 3 high factors. So they're the hardest to speed read because sometimes you're like, well, I see a bit of this, I see a bit of this, I see a bit of that. So it's very hard to figure that out. But yeah, when you actually do a profile, it shows you exactly where it is. So it graphs it out and it shows you like, here's where your I is, here's where your D is, here's where your S is, here's where your C is. And it talks to you about what you bring to the table, what having those factors and in which order you have them, what that is. So it actually gives you this phenomenal little synopsis of who you are. I've had people say to me that, like, Victoria, like this, you're like a fortune teller, you're like a psychic, or how do you do this? You answer 24 questions and then you get this big detailed report, which is very user friendly. And all of a sudden, like, you're like, oh my God, this is me. How does it know this? So honestly, it's frighteningly accurate. I will tell you that.
How would high I work with high C?
Yeah, good question. Because they're really polar opposites, aren't they? So yes, you picked up on a good point. So D's and S's are polar opposites and I's and C's are polar opposites. So honestly, it's one of those things where you have to kind of look and respect the other person's, boundaries, I guess. So the I will sort of have to realize, okay, I don't want to overwhelm the C with so much chatter and talk and whatever. And I have to give them a little bit more information. And the C would have to realize, okay, this I needs to talk and do a lot of crazy, sharing and telling. And I have to realize that they're not going to be as detail oriented as me. So a lot of times I work with partners, like with people who are working together. I do facilitations between 2 people. And the beauty of knowing your profile is that it eliminates misunderstandings. So you can literally, joke with one another and say, oh my gosh, my high C just needs details. Please feed my high C information. Or, my high S is feeling rushed right now. So can you not rush my high S? And it really takes the sting out of it. And so much of what I do, and this honestly is why I do what I do. Every week, at least, I see these phenomenal light bulb moments where people understand one another and they're like, wow, this has changed the nature of our working relationship. Like, we have such a great working relationship. And now we have the benefit of having, with the IC example you just gave me, not only do we have that social, gregarious, outgoing, selling person, but we also have the careful, logical, detail-oriented person to catch any mistakes and keep us on track. So together, now we're so powerful.
I know we promised to wrap it up in an hour, but we have a lot of questions. If it's okay with you, I'll just ask the rest of the questions.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So someone asked, what is your own personality type?
Oh, I know that one always comes in. Can we make this interactive Somebody take a few guesses. I want, this is your first chance to practice speed reading behavior.
I think Michelle, I think you should post whatever you think her personality is.
Yeah.
Because Michelle is the one who asked. So I'll go to the next one while she's posting that.
Okay.
Is this I similar to personality color? Does it work the same? EI. I'm not sure. Is this EI similar to personality color? Does it work the same?
The emotional, I think they're talking about the emotional intelligence assessment. So
okay.
that one is definitely a deeper dive. It's not as 1, 2, 3, 4 the way DISC is. So with a DISC report, you're looking at about 5 or 6 pages. With the EQ or EI report, you're looking at about 30 pages, and it delves into all kinds of things like self-awareness, empathy. So this, if you want to know where your empathy is, this will measure it. You know, confidence, optimism, all of these types of things. So that one is really good for coaching. It's a real deep dive, and it's really good sometimes when people, if they're trying to figure out like, what is stopping me? Like, why am I not able to get to that next level? Or what is you know, stopping me from making these communications go well? Or, you know, why am I not being able to get more clients or whatever? That's what that one's really good for. So it's very, very much a deep dive, and it's all about understanding and self-awareness.
Michelle responded, she thinks that you're a D and I.
That I'm a
I and D.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Does anyone else have any other guesses?
We got a couple of I's.
Yeah. You know what I have to say? I think when I present, because I have to make it engaging, especially over when we're online, I think I end up acting more like an I. So here's what I am, guys. It's always tricky because I'm one of those people that have 3 high factors, so I'm harder to read. But I do have a high D, and I do have a high S, and I have a high C. So there you go. Yeah. And I think where you would see with my S coming in is that, you know, a lot of the stuff that I do is I'm working with people, I'm coaching people, I'm helping people. So that whole being of support, being helpful, that part is really a big part of what I'm doing. And so that's where it comes in. And I'm also, in terms of my C and my I, like I'm somebody who is not impulsive at all. I will never make an impulsive decision. I'm very much about researching, preparing, doing all of that kind of stuff. So that's where you see my C coming into it.
We got a private question, not on this list. He asked, how do you recognize people's personality over the phone?
Oh, okay, good one. Like, you know what? A lot of the things that we talked about. So are they really, think about what they're saying to you. Think of the tone of voice they're using. So are they speaking in a very direct, authoritative tone? Are they getting right to the point? Are they saying, hey, yeah, can you tell me, is this such and such a price? Or what does it take for me to blah, 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 blah? If they're saying things like that, chances are they're a high D. If they're talking to you and they say, okay, so here's my situation. My house was listed for 6 months. I didn't like the agent. He wasn't very nice. And then one time an agent came and he left muddy footprints in my kitchen and blah, 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 blah. Guess what? That person's an I. If the person's calling you and they're asking you very detailed questions about stats, you know, what are the comparables going for? You know, what is that area zoned for? Guess what? High C. So the same principles apply. The tone they're asking it in and the way they're asking it. Are they asking very short to the point things or long rambling things?
Okay. If there are 2 members in a team, what's the best one to be with? If one person is high I.
So if you're a high I, what's an ideal one for you to work with?
Yes.
Okay. So again, I have to just say, part of what I do is I make it work. And whoever you're working with, we have strategies to come up with it to make it work. But I will tell you that I's and D's work pretty well together, and I's and S's work really well together. So that's one of those things. They tend to kind of complement one another. And quite often, people have a high I, especially if they're in sales. Usually, they do have sort of a moderately high D as well. So either of those works pretty well. The person who asked the question about the I and the C, that was a very astute question because that one is definitely more of a challenge.
Okay. What do you mean when you say high? Is it possible to have none of the above, 50%?
Okay, so good question. So when I'm saying high, that means that's your leading factor. And high doesn't mean good and low doesn't mean bad. So because today we just had a really brief presentation, I wasn't able to go into all the low factors, okay? So when I say high, it just means that is your leading factor. So if I is your leading factor, then that's what that means. It doesn't mean, like, we have all four factors. So if you were to see a disc graph, and I don't know if you can see this in the camera, I'm just gonna make sure you can't see the person's name. But okay, can you see that? So basically this here, that is like the midline, that's showing high or low. So you see this person has 3 high factors, and that's where you can see it. So you can tell, okay, they've got a high S, they've got a high C and a high I, and then there's their D, they've got a lower D. So you have them all, it's just where are they placed. And based on that, that tells you a lot of what your personality is. And so when you get your report, it's very detailed, but then I also always have a consultation where I talk to you and I say, here's what's going on in your graphs. We have 3 graphs. We have you in your natural state. We have how you're behaving at work, and we have how you are under stress. And that's super, super helpful to figure out what's going on with someone, or if you're doing it on an employee or a team member, also helps you kind of figure out, oh, what's going on with them right now? Like, how do I get in there? Like, how can I motivate them? You know, we can actually pull reports called How to Manage, and you actually know how to manage a person based on their DISC profile. So that one's phenomenal because it's great for both people. It's great for the manager, so for either the team leader or the broker, because they're being given an actual specific set of tools to manage that person. And it's great for the person who's being managed, because that person is going to be learning how to engage with them, how they ideally like to be engaged with.
When someone is mixed personality, how could we find out which personality is active on the topic we're sharing?
So, like, which one is the most dominant?
Yes, stronger, yes.
Yeah. Again, it's really going to be about those little observable behaviors that we talked about, those signs that you're going to see. So, yeah, they do have a couple, but sometimes I kind of joke about it and I say to someone, think about like the 4 factors driving in a car. So like the D is the driver, the I is the passenger, and then the S and the C are in the back seat. Well, sometimes, you know, depending on what's going on, sometimes one of those other factors gets up into the driver's seat. And if that's what you're seeing, so let's say the person is a combination of, you know, a D and an I, and the I's being the one in the driver's seat. The I's being the one who's talking to you and engaging. You're like, oh, this person's totally a high I. But then maybe when it comes to negotiation, all of a sudden you're finding you're getting these very clipped, short, direct, and like, what's the money I can get? And what are the, so if you do that, you're like, oh, guess what happened? That D just got into the driver's seat now. So I am now going to do all those things that I saw for D. I'm going to meet them with the facts to the point, not too many details. And that's what you're going to do. It's mirroring. It's that whole giving them what they're putting in that moment, trying to connect with them in their own way.
Someone asked a question not related to this personality. She's asking, what is your prediction regarding the future market of real estate in Toronto?
I'm not going to speculate on that. That's not my area of expertise. So I'm just like you in terms of reading what I'm reading, looking at the stats. I think everything shows that it was in a really good position coming into this. And that, you know, it'll probably rebound better than the stock market and things like that. But I am by no means an expert on that. So I'm not gonna, I only know what I read, which is what you read too.
So Victoria, if you're capable acting differently according to different environments you're in, it means everyone else can confuse others with their type of personalities as well, correct?
You know, that's possible. It's possible. It doesn't tend to go on for very long. Most people can't really keep that up. You only got kind of the bullet points with me. I wasn't able to go into the nuances. I think a lot of the stuff that you were seeing with me is probably D, the emphasis and a lot of that kind of stuff. one of the things I'll say is that because this is my industry and my field, I've done a lot of work on myself in terms of knowing my emotional intelligence. So you may remember back at the beginning that I said how Ds come across. If a D has a really high EQ, it's really hard to notice that they have a D. So that's something that I'm very aware of. And I think a lot of the mannerisms or the things that you're seeing is passion, is emphasis, because I believe so firmly in this. This is what I do. This is what I love and I'm passionate about. So I think you're seeing that. Yes, people could do that, but I don't know that what the point would be in doing that. Like, I don't think people are really able to carry on in that type of behavior for very long. I think you would see more and more signs of their true colors as time goes on.
We got another private question. It says, when we're going to listing presentation, can we understand their personalities from their interior design?
That's a really good question. Yeah, I like that. You know what? I think that's definitely something else that you can add to kind of your list of things here. Sure. So for instance, like, especially the parts where I talk about the fashion style and all that, you know, I think if the person's got really strong, bold colors on the walls, that's telling, right? High D. I think if they are the person that has a lot of, you know, framed quotes, you know, kind of you go into the house and there's like sort of pictures up, but they've got like very inspirational kind of quotes and there's lots of flowers, I would say high I. You know, S's and C's, they are a little bit more understated, so it's kind of hard. I think the S's would probably have, S's would have a lot of family photos up because that's very important to them. So you'd see a lot of family photos. And I would have to say for C that you would see a very neat and organized house, that things had systems, you know, books are alphabetized. Oh, look, see, I'm giving myself away. I do have a high C. There's my books, and guess what? They're alphabetized. So, so things like that. But that's a great question. I love that question.
Going back to the previous question, she's asking, what's your suggestion on this topic, please?
What's my suggestion on?
The previous one, the one regarding confusing people by different personalities.
You know what? You just have to go with what you're seeing. Okay. So I think whatever signs you're getting from that person, if you're getting the signs that high D or high I, that's the approach you're going to take. You have to sort of go at face value. So if they're being direct and they're giving you those types of signals, you're going to take a high D approach. If they're being very I and chatty and whatever, you're going to give them the high I approach. I don't think there's anything else that you can do in that situation, but meet them where they are. If down the road you got to know them better and you saw things were different, then you would adjust accordingly to what you think they actually would be. Most people are who they are, especially in these circumstances. They really show their true colors, especially when you get to things with emotions, with buying, selling. It really triggers sort of the person's true emotional core.
What are the most common questions you will ask when you talk to the clients in the first time over the phone?
What is the most common question that they ask or that you should ask?
To understand your client, what's the first question that you should ask over the phone to find out about their personality?
Okay, that's a really good question. So I guess let's say it's somebody and they want to sell their house or they want to move to a new house. I guess I would say to them, why is it tell me about what's going on in your life right now that is making you want to move. So what's your motivations for moving? And I think that will open up a door in terms of all kinds of things. So if it's very much about family and either expanding or downsizing and they're talking a lot and they're telling you about their kids and things like that, they're probably either going to be an S or an I. If they're talking about thinking that they've made an investment, that we're at a good time in the market, I want to sell while I can still recapture some of my money, or I want to do whatever, chances are they're going to be more of a D or a C.
That wraps up today's presentation because we have no more content. We appreciate it. We went way over 1 hour. And
that's okay.
A lot of information. Thank you so much for, on behalf of PICA, we'd like to thank you for being with us today. And Today's presentation wouldn't be possible without help of hardworking volunteers of PICRA. I'd like to thank them as well. And next week, we have Johnston Chang, Cornerstone Marketing Realty Broker of Record. The topic will be New Market Outlook for Pre-Construction Project during 2020. Thank you again, and have a wonderful afternoon and great weekend.
Thanks, guys. My contact info is there if anybody wants to ask me any other questions. If you think of something, I'm happy to answer it. And if you want to reach out and find out how to do a disc profile, or if you want some suggestions on how to incorporate it into your CRM, I'm happy to talk to you. Okay, so thanks so much. You were a fantastic audience, and I loved all the questions. Very, very interactive. That's always.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you again next Friday at 3 p.m. Have a wonderful weekend. Safe weekend.
Thanks. Bye.